quite a few things that were polarizing to the public because there were very strong opinions about what we should or should not do. So it was an opportunity to hear from different people that even had ideas that you've never even heard of or considered. So it was an opportunity for sure to refine that skill, um, and actually make it work for the community.
And that's and you and human relations. We go before the council, we go
Hmm.
before the county board of commission, and
Hmm.
we also go before the state legislature. Not all are going to be in agreement with what our ideology
Right.
may be in order to enhance our community. But we understand that we must be able to work with them to get them to see the importance of the reason why we think that A is better than B.
Right.
And I salute you for that. And the commission itself,
Thank you.
given the commission has been in existence for ever since 1964, so it has a long and fruitful life. So I salute you for that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. So let's jump into one of the biggest conversations right now, not only across the state of North Carolina, but across the nation. There are people everywhere from the West Coast all the way to the top of the northern portion of our nation, just from coast to coast, talking about Hurricane Helene and the effect that it has had on Western North Carolina. One of the questions that I've been asked that I am not able to effectively articulate that I would like to pose to you as a potential new member of our Senate in the state of North Carolina: what role, Simone, does the House and the Senate play in emergency response in North Carolina in areas such as Western North Carolina? And if you were in place already, what would you be advocating for in terms of how this should be handled?
Well, so I'll answer that a couple of ways. Well, obviously, we play a very big role. I say we as if I'm already there, but we play a very big role in it. Things that like the rainy day fund and certain things or certain funds where money is poured into over the year or over the years, I should say, are actually critical to moments like this. So the rainy day fund, I believe, I'm going to quote this wrong. So maybe Mr. Floyd, you can probably fill in the details on that.
4.75
See,
billion.
I knew you had it. I knew you had it. Yeah, so it was low at a certain point, but then there was a fight to keep funding it and keep putting money into it and not spend it. So had we spent that money, we wouldn't have those funds available to send to Western North Carolina to actually help in moments like this. So it's a critical role that the legislature plays in being able to serve the community when we need it. Imagine if we had Western North Carolina happening and another situation happening at the same time. We would be in a critical state if we weren't prepared, just like us in our household. If
Mhm.
we're not saving, if we're not preparing for the unexpected, or if we're just spending flippantly, then when it comes time for a desperate moment where we have to help ourselves, our families, maybe even our neighbors, we wouldn't be properly set up to do so. So it is a critical role. I know they met yesterday and I believe another time to vote on the budget. I think it's 273 million that they're voting on.
Two plus 200 plus million.
200 plus, okay. 200
Mhm.
plus million that they're voting on pushing through to make sure the aid is sent to Western North Carolina.
Okay. So in speaking about the budget, one of the articles that I read recently that I was talking to Floyd about earlier, and we're going to dig into this a lot later with just he and I, but I'd like to know your thoughts about this. It was an article from Western North Carolina, I believe it was Franklin County, where Sheriff White was saying that he was really frustrated with the county manager and how she had sent out this letter indicating that everything would need to be pre-approved before anything was done in relation to relief based upon the reimbursement process. Ms. Pemberton, do you feel like legislators should potentially look at how reimbursements are handled in these emergency situations in order to remove some of this red tape? Or what are your thoughts and feelings about how red tape could potentially prevent um, life saving measures in terms of situations like this?
Well, yes, we should look at how we're doing the reimbursement. In an emergency, you can't do things the way you do in a non emergency. So we should be looking at different ways to eliminate red tape. Red tape is, I think, what we keep hearing about when it comes to aid getting there, whether it be money, water, whatever other services that they need in that area. So sometimes we need to get, the government needs to get out of the way, and just allow for service, for resources to come through, while at the same time kind of having boundaries on it, but not being so. It's like having a micromanager that kind of prevents progress, in my opinion, and that is not always the case, but a lot of times that is the case. It kind of feels like some of that and some other weird stuff is also going on with in this situation. So
Absolutely.
yes, I believe that. Oh, did I interrupt? Go ahead.
No, I said absolutely. Go ahead.
Oh, I do believe that we need to get the red tape out of the way. We've got people there that are in critical need. And this isn't just for Western North Carolina. They're probably dealing with the same thing in Florida right now because of the storm that just hit overnight. Milton, I believe, is the name. So, as much as possible, I think we have to keep our focus on the fact that these are actual people that are experiencing this. This isn't just a storm where you can kind of look at it from a high level and forget the daily moment by moment impact that is happening with the people that need resources that we can unlock and allow to flow through. So, hopefully that answered your question.
Absolutely. Mr. Floyd, do you have a follow up on that or do you want to?
Sometimes, you know, and included, in the 2+ uh, 100 billion, that you have to look at the legislation itself and see how the language is incorporated into that bill. It may be wherein that reimbursement is automatically included into the bill process, but it's a matter of really going into depth into the bill to see how the state want to do the accountability of the 200 billion. So it's accountability process.
Absolutely. Simone, how does your this is probably not a question you were expecting this morning. And if you don't wish to answer it, I'm okay with that because I recognize that it's not necessarily a typical question. But how does your faith play into how you are handling your campaign, how you will handle office if and when elected, and how you just go about your day-to-day activities? How does your faith guide you in these processes? That's important to me. That's why I'm asking you that.
Yeah, I've had that question one other time, and it was a unique question. I appreciate it, so I thank you for the question. So my faith governs my personal life, and everything that I do. It's paramount. It's like primary in my personal life. When it comes to me as an elected official, it impacts my integrity. It impacts my drive. It impacts my excellence. It impacts all of that. At the same time, when it comes to certain decisions that are being made, my job is still to listen to the people and find out what it is that the people are asking for. Now, there are certain moments when the people might be asking for something that I just can't. I can't endorse. I can't support because of my faith. But ultimately, my role is to address the needs of the people, and that's one of the reasons why you don't see me leading with faith. In this, I shouldn't say it that way. You don't see me talking about it, in public or anything like that, only because the Lord is part of me, So when you get me, you get him, So it's not, I don't really separate it. Now, some people do lead with conversations about the Lord and all of that. And I'm not knocking that. I respect it. I love it, actually. That's just not my way of presenting. So, my faith, in short, is the driving force of everything that I do, every decision that I make. Um, uh, at the same time, I'm also here to listen to what it is that the people are asking for and advocate for those things.
Absolutely. You know, as an aside, Mr. Floyd,
Mhm.
Larry and I were talking last night. Simone, just hang on a second. Larry and I were talking last night, and he asked me a question because we saw an ad come up, and it was a very it was a very pointed ad, and you could tell that ad was intended to disparage a person's faith, right? And he asked me, and it was about abortion. He said, Tisha, well, where do you stand on this? And I think that Simone gave just now she gave a good answer in my estimation. And I'll tell you why I think that, because I was explaining to my husband, my personal position is that abortion should be illegal. My understanding of the Bible says that God gives people free will. And because God gives people free will, if this is something that they want, then I'm not to tell them you can't have this. If I'm an elected official, I'm not to tell them you can't have this. I don't have to endorse it. I don't have to stand with it, but I don't have to tell you you can't do this, because God said you can do what you choose to do. You just have to suffer the consequences of your choices. Interestingly enough, he looked at me and said, that makes sense to me, but there has to be balance in an approach like that. So, Simone, I think what I'm hearing you say is balancing your faith with the responsibilities of your position, but not abandoning your faith because of your position.
That's right.
And that makes sense to me. And I'll say this lastly about this topic. I wish that our legislators, particularly those who are believers, understood that you can stand in your faith and you can create systems that support your faith. Because how hard would it be for legislators to say, okay, if abortion's legal, okay. But here's our caveat. It will not be taxpayer funded, because so many taxpayers don't agree with this. We won't use their money to support this system. But Floyd, we've talked about that before, and you told me that'll never happen. So I'm gonna move on. Simone, how about E. Smith High School? What do you think about the conversation going on with that? We talked about the budget. What do you think that the state should be doing for communities like Cumberland County, who have aging infrastructure with their schools and need to invest in building new high schools? It's an overwhelming situation for the state because there are so many communities in this position. But how do you think that that should be handled?
Well, in every budget, there is a line item. Well, I shouldn't say in every budget. In at least the last two budgets, there were a line item that accounted for, the repair and replacement of schools. I shouldn't say replacement, repair of schools and their grounds, and um, along with any other thing related to public schools or schools as a whole. So, what I think is important is that we make sure that we're voting for those budgets, that when those things come through, that we actually support those bills, or those budgets as they come down the line, and make sure, one, from Raleigh, we're making sure that we're getting as much money placed in for Cumberland County as we can. But then when that comes across your table to vote for, then we should actually be voting for it. So, as you know, my opponent voted against it.
Wait, hold on, wait, pause, because I want to play something.
Okay.
I thought this was a cute ad to me. So I want to play this because I thought that it was very catchy, and I think it does a really good job of making the point that you're saying. So bear with me just a second while I hit play. Y'all let me know again if you can't hear it.
Hello. Hey, Shonda. I'm trying to understand all this political stuff. What's up with this new candidate, Simone Pemberton, running for state senate out of the 19th district? She's the one you should be voting for. Her? I thought you were supporting her opponent. No way. Let me tell you about our current state senator. Do you know her supporters spent about $3 million to help her get to Raleigh, but she didn't bring 1 cent back to Cumberland County. In fact, she even voted against the state budget that would have awarded Cumberland County $127 million in funding. Wow, she voted against that? Yes, she did. And you can check her voting record on the General Assembly website. And we need all the help we can get. Cumberland County is classified as a Tier 1 community. Do you know what that means? It means we're broke. Man, looks like Simone Pemberton is the one Cumberland County needs in Raleigh. It's definitely time for a change. You know what? I'm casting my vote for Simone Pemberton for State Senate District 19. And so am I.
For more information, visit faithforward.com. Paid for by the Committee to Elect M. Simone Pemberton.
Shonda said, yes, she did.
She said it like that too when she was
She did. I think that is so funny. So talk a little bit about that. You in that ad, there's an assertion that your opponent voted against the budget. So what does that mean for our community? Which, and Floyd and I talk about it. Floyd, I'll ask you later. Floyd and I talk about this all the time, that Cumberland County is a Tier 1 community. We cannot afford to be turning money away.
Right.
Now, I always say all money is not good money, but most certainly we cannot afford to be voting against budgets that bring money into our community unless there's something fundamentally wrong with it. And I mean, like, overwhelmingly, you can't at all fathom how this could work out. What is the case with this? What are we seeing with your opponent and voting against this budget?
Well, she has said that she's voting against it and continues to vote against it because of the Opportunity Scholarship, her opposition to that. So, my statement to that is the parents are asking for
Overwhelmingly.
yes, for Opportunity Scholarship. So, because you personally don't agree with it, and it's not like you're addressing anything that you don't agree concerning it, which is also our job, would be our job, is if there are gaps in it, let's fix the gaps. Let's not just say, hey, keep your kid in an area where you don't want to keep your kid, your student, your child. Um, but she's voting against it because of the Opportunity Scholarship. So that is saying that because I don't like Opportunity Scholarships, I'm voting against Medicaid expansion funding, which is the platform that she's run on
Right.
initially and this time, that she would get Medicaid expansion, and she voted against it. And the people don't know that. When we have issues with clean water, she voted against clean water initiatives. Although there are tons of photo ops of saying, oh, I was here and I did this, she voted against it. When it comes down to anything that we can think of that Cumberland County and Fayetteville has needed, it was part of that budget, and that's how it was paid off. So that's one of the reasons why I make such a point about voting against the budget, because it impacts every part of our stability here in the city. It impacts our city council and county commission, their ability to plan, because they get money from Raleigh as well. So it is a major deal to vote against budgets, especially for the reason that it's being voted against.
Absolutely. Mr. Floyd, do you have any questions before we ask Ms. Pemberton for her final thoughts?
Well, Simone, uh, I would love to see when I was in the General Assembly that a bill introduced that has whatever language it is, and it moved from committee to committee, and it be the same when it gets to the fifth committee. I would love to see that bill. It will never happen.
Right.
And so every bill that comes before you are going to have things in there that you don't like. I mean, that's just politics.
Mhm.
But you look in there and see what in that bill that you like. For instance, opportune scholarship. Now, Cumberland County, I think we're about the third or fourth community that has the largest number of scholarships.
We're the
And
first.
when you look at that, when you look at that, if you look at the percentage, a lot of minority kids are receiving these scholarships. So, as a former member of the General Assembly, I supported Opportune Scholarship because if my colleague, Miss Waddell, if she wants to fix her kids a peanut butter sandwich and get her mother, to drop the kids off to school than to send them to a failing school, I salute Miss Waddell. She should have, she know more about which school environment is best for her child. Every child is not good in a public setting.
Right.
Some learn faster in a private sector. But when you look at the overall responsibility, the budget provides about anywhere between 55 to 58% of every dollar. But don't forget now, you are a service-based organization and you're a growing community. So you got to scramble the egg and provide money across the board. You can't put all money in education. You just can't do it. You just can't do it. So Opportune Scholarship has truly helped out a lot of minorities because minority students you know, are in poor environment. And so if you can help that student accelerate, then I support it, whether it's public school or private school. I support whichever way that parents can determine which is the best educational process for his or her child.
Absolutely.
That's
Final
our 2 cent right now.
final thoughts, Miss Pemberton?
Let me just tie one other thing back to that budget that surprised me. So, obviously, I come from a military family, and I know my opponent was a former, well, is a veteran. Uh, One of the things that was in that budget is money for the Veterans Administration. And during the time that I have been volunteering, I met so many homeless vets. I met veterans that weren't homeless, but talked about the challenges that they were having in receiving care, even through the Veterans Administration. And there was a lot of talk about money concerning that. So $26 million was voted against going to the Veterans Administration. Also within that budget is money for public schools, money for public schools. There was money for teacher pay increase and a lot of different things. So when I do talk about these things online, I was accused of attacking a black elected official, but I had to remind them, wait a minute, holding an elected official accountable for poor representation is not an attack. It is bringing it to the forefront and saying we must have better than this, and we have to require more, not only of our state level, but any elected official. We should require more because we are placing them in that office to do a job. And if they're not doing that job, then we need to remove them, just like we would in a business. So, and I'll say the same for me. Should I have the honor of being elected? If I'm not doing my job, get me out of there because that means I'm bad for Fayetteville. So we've already seen an example of someone that's bad for North Carolina as well as bad for Fayetteville and Cumberland County. And that's one of the reasons why I'm running to take that seat so I can be a better representation for this area. So, final words. You can find out more about me at fayforward.com. That's FAYforward.com. And I would ask for your vote. I am asking for your vote and your support. And I appreciate
Absolutely.
you for even allowing me this opportunity to be on.
No problem. And you're very welcome. Thank you for joining us. And we look forward to seeing how your election turns out, Simone.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye. So, Mr. Floyd, it's been an interesting week since the last time we spoke. The last time we spoke, we were um I don't have my list still, but we were talking about some things, but we didn't have all of what we have going on in terms of, well, let me just say this. The last time we spoke, there had not been a vote regarding E.E. Smith High School. We saw an interesting turn of events with the county commissioners actually taking this to a vote. Now, you have been saying all along that the chairman of the board of the county commissioners said that this is just not a priority right now. Well, we saw a shift in that. What did we see, Mr. Floyd?
Well, we saw the county finally taking a partial vote is to not place the school at Fort Liberty. And the reason we have been discussing on our radio program, sometimes you take public money to jumpstart economic development. So if the school would have been built on the Fort Liberty, then there would be no economic growth around there because it's a military base.
Right.
By placing it within the community, you grow the economic base. And that's something that we have been saying for the longest. And so that was one of the statements that Commissioner Adams made. And finally, realization set in with the county commissioner to move forward with some type of with a building for Smith. The concern now come about the location. Where is the? I think they said they need between 75 to 100 acres of land in order to have the school, as it relates to modern school development.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at it, it's 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 sort of like, where are we going to find these acres of land in order to do that? And so that's the question now that remains for the county board of commission. The county mentioned that they have already have an extra, I think, 160 plus $1 million for school renovation, and part of that money is for Smith. And sometime back, I think it mentioned of that money, 60+ million was for Smith, and it mushroomed from 60 to 99 to 148
Hmm.
million. So if they keep waiting, it may be 200 million before they get started there because of cost. So I'm pleased that they have made this decision. I hope that and wish that they will move forward with a location and then with the design showing that they can start moving forward with building. But it is the county responsibility to provide to build schools. The state will give them some support, but many schools use the educational lot. Many communities use the educational lottery to help offset some of the costs in maintaining their schools.
Hmm.
But the county commission, as I mentioned, has 168, 100 plus, 160+ million already to aid the schools. And I think at one point in time, the school had a list of projects that they need to do to enhance their school. But many of the schools, like I said, are aging. And then, in fact, they even found some form of mold at Smith. Uh, one substitute teacher mentioned that. So it's time to move. It's time to move forward on that. It really is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I look forward to seeing how that conversation turns out. Now, Mr. Floyd, state funding for disaster relief. We've been hearing all kind of horror stories behind what's going on in Western North Carolina. We've been hearing that national funding is bottlenecked. We've been hearing that state funding is red taped, and there are some assertions that a lot of this will have an effect on the upcoming election. So, Mr. Floyd, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I mean, anytime you have any kind of disaster, there is going to be uh, the pros and the cons about not receiving, receiving. All sorts of things is going to be posted on social media. But I believe that all agencies that's involved are putting their effort to provide some form of relief and support for Western Carolina. You know, I I just can't see and can't understand why you would say. I mean, when you were trying to get to a community where the roads had been just destroyed, you know, everyone is that including Fort Liberty, our North Carolina National Guard, all including local municipalities, are aiding the the efforts in Western Carolina. But there's a pivoted point. Each agency has their role and responsibility. As an example, the Department of Transportation uh, have a listing of this. Say, for instance, that 40 won't be completed, ready to travel until next year. So, but they understand the importance of getting the roads repaired so they can get in transportation from the land, and many coming in from the air. So, you know, it's a process, and FEMA is trying to provide these. I think they said they had 1,400 people there on the grounds trying to provide some assistance. Fort Liberty is sending 1,000 support. The National Guard is about 800. So when you look at it, all are trying to provide the assistance that is needed for Western Carolina. And I just wish that, you know, that we just put our efforts in supporting those citizens who have lost a lot, and some have lost all.
I think one of the biggest concerns that I'm hearing from not only the peripheral of Western North Carolina, but from a lot of people that are directly in Western North Carolina is that this too has become politicized. And I think when the question is asked, what would be the motivation behind that? Western North Carolina, with the exception of Boone and Asheville, are predominantly Republican territory. And when you are looking at a battleground state and you're looking at a hard pressed election that needs every advantage that it can possibly get, I can see. I mean, I know that it's warm and fuzzy to think, why would anybody allow other people to suffer for their gain? But that has been our experience for centuries, particularly surrounding people who are in power or who wish to gain power. And so I think when we're looking at the response efforts and we're looking at the different narratives that are coming up, we do owe we owe the people in Western North Carolina a real conversation about what is the potential that you are not receiving the highest and best aid or assistance, particularly in this hour, to disenfranchise your vote. When we talk about voter suppression, we often make that just something that affects the Black community. But voter suppression is voter suppression, regardless of who it's happening to. And I think that we can absolutely ask the question: are some of the responses to this catastrophe a concerted effort or a part of what could be perceived as voter suppression? Because when you are concerned about where your child is because you can't find them, even if your child is 40, you're not thinking about going out and voting. If you are concerned about your home being rebuilt or whether or not you're going to be able to access clean water or food or any of the medical supplies that you may need, voting is not top of mind. So I certainly think that it's nice to think that everybody is doing what they're supposed to be doing and that the issues really are just red tape. But I venture to wonder if these sheriffs that are speaking out, and not just the one in Franklin County, but if these sheriffs that are speaking out in Western North Carolina, if these masses of people who are speaking out in Western North Carolina, because what social media has done is it has connected us rapidly to information, and yes, it must be vetted, but much of what we are seeing is firsthand accounts and experiences. And when we have, I'm sure that you know somebody who has gone to volunteer their time to help with the cleanup efforts. I know a few people who have, gone, they've had the proper training and they've gone into Western North Carolina. And Mr. Floyd, it's just interesting the accounts that they're sending back to us here in the Sandhill region. And I it would be remiss of me to not make mention of this, because I want our audience to understand when we talk about understanding politics, there's a very dark and ugly side of politics. And I want to remind everybody that it always sounds like science fiction until you see a smoking gun, because nobody, and I'll use, R. Kelly and Jeffrey Epstein and I'll use R. Kelly, Epstein, and now Sean Combs as examples of the fact that before these things began to be validated by affidavits and by legal action, it sounded like science fiction that this could be happening in the realm of entertainment, that these horrific things that happen to amass power and keep it. So I want people to think about that as we're looking at what's playing out politically, to recognize that yes, it may sound like science fiction and it may sound like conspiracy theory, but the reality is that reality is stranger than fiction, and that it is only sounds like science fiction until that smoking gun hits. So do not be lulled into a false sense of security, because one of the things that gives me great pause, Mr. Floyd, through all of this is the fact that even when we watched the Jean-Pierre lady, that's the communications person for the Biden administration, as we watched her stand up and have a conversation about misinformation as it relates to the aid that's being sent in to the victims, not just in Western North Carolina, but in Virginia and other areas, Tennessee, that have been afflicted by Hurricane Helene. There was no real ownership of the fact that we are having to go and petition for more dollars because we are spending so many dollars on international aid relief efforts that we are not prepared and equipped. And you drill home the rainy day fund and how we need to be ready for an emergency right here in North Carolina. Our federal government should have the same responsibility. And I just think when we're looking at, and I'm not trying to say that it would have been any better under any different administration, but I want people to understand that politically, the play is to get in power. And a lot of people, when they get in power, their motivation becomes to stay in power, and they will do that by any means necessary.
Well, teach you, you know, when you look at it, and I understand, you know, what our sheriffs are thinking, but at the same time, you have county managers and city managers have a responsibility, and that is a balanced budget and what that governmental entity provide for them as it relates to their budget. And if you're going over that budget, it is going to require some type approval because you can't spend no more than what you have been that has been set forth by that governmental agency. So that's what the county manager of one county is saying. It must be pre-approved, and that is that pre-approved means that okay, you know, if you want to go, then we would have to find the money from somewhere in the budget to pay these persons to go. I understand you saying that some person is going to volunteer, that they have volunteered. If the person volunteered to go, then let's look at the accountability that is there, whether that they use annual leave, sick leave, vacation, or whatever. They want to have some form of accountability, and that is that local government will not come back. That person would not come back and then seek to recoup or be paid for the time in which he or she said that they have volunteered or whatever. Accountability is there to protect the government in the long run from what may be a lawsuit. And so that is why they're saying is that pre-approval is necessary because I'm only allocated so much money for my agency, and that is the police department, the sheriff department. So where's the money going to come from? That's what they look at. I mean, the heart is there to provide, to be supported, because they at one day is going to need support. But at the same time, that county has approved X dollars.
And I just have 2 points before we leave out, before we close out. And the first point is that it's so unfortunate that people of great privilege who have resources and means, so people who have personal helicopters, people who had the ability to be able to get to those who were suffering, were being blocked by these same governments. And they weren't asking for a dollar in return. They just wanted to go in and extract people who were at risk of
Right,
loss
see,
of life.
but what they also said is that, I mean, I understand what you're saying, is that you also had more uh, as it relates to planes coming into that area that has not been affirmed by the FAA, you know, because you got to look at flight patterns.
Well, so,
You got to
and
have, you got to have, if you don't have these things, then again, you are leading toward, you're heading towards accidents. So what they said is that if you're coming in, is to report, you know, let's make a flight pattern.
Well, Mr. Floyd, that would track for me if many of the accounts that came out before these positions of the governmental agencies had not already documented what they had done in order to be able to go into these areas. And these people who have these planes, they understand the ramifications of how to utilize their equipment, and they know the process. But let me come to my second statement, because that brings me to my second point, which is back to the red tape. It always amazes me that the way that we do business with the money that we give our government on behalf of what we need as a nation carry so much red tape, but they take the money that we give our government as a nation and give it to other countries with no red tape at all. And that is the point that, for me, just kind of sums up how all of this rolls. And again, I will say, this is not an endorsement or an indictment against any party. It is the political system, because ultimately we exist to make understanding politics simple. And the simplified part of all of this is we, the taxpayers, put these dollars forward so that when we have a need, our needs are addressed. This is not happening consistently in many areas. If you look back still at Flint, Michigan, I am not aware yet if they have had their issue resolved with their water source or not. Because this has been ongoing for a decade or better. So when we, the citizens, and we've been under different administrations, Republican and Democrat. So again, not an endorsement or an indictment.
You, the Ukraine have come to America and said to us, allow us to use the missiles that you provide to us to go inside of Russia. They came, but that's what we're talking about, red tape. We will give you this, but you can't use them for X. So everything that you do, there have to be some form of guidelines. They have to be. You just can't, because you have a helicopter and you want to bring in resources. Sure, there's a flight pattern that's there. That's simply clear. Just don't bring me in because you got other aircraft that's coming in at the same time that may create a problem, an accident. And so that's what I'm saying, is that they were saying no red tape, just pre-approval, just saying I'm coming in on whatever at whatever time to also provide safety.
But I think that there are pilots that dispute that fact. And I think it boils down to,
I'm not denying it. I'm not
right, I
denying
just think it comes down to whose version do you believe. And I don't trust our government. And because of that, and the last thing that I want to get out about this is that point, is that we are a nation that is dying literally, dying financially, dying emotionally, because
I
we
understand.
continue to put
I
resources
understand that.
forward
But
and
when you
we are not reaping the benefit of the resources that we're putting forward. You got the floor, Floyd, because I don't have anything else to say.
I'm just saying that that there are processes and there are steps. If you don't have, I'm gonna say this to you.
Yes,
I
sir.
remember when I used to do we used to have food giveaway, okay, and then finally I came to the realization that it was necessary for me to have urban ministry to be the source, because I found out that people were triple dipping. They would come to ours, Mary, James, and Tom, and they were taking away the resources from the people that was really in need. So it had to be some type central point so that we could serve the people. And that's all that I'm saying here. It's the same thing that many say.
Do
Service.
you think that our government is efficient, Mr. Floyd?
I just think that our government, the United States,
Is it efficient? Does our government operate efficiently?
I don't know of any organization that operate efficiently.
But I'm specifically
But what
asking
I'm
about
saying to
this
you
organization.
is that anytime you want to be the big brother of the global world, you're going to have these kinds of concerns.
But are we efficient? Because efficiency,
I
lack
just
of
said that
efficiency.
I don't know of any organization that run 100% efficient.
I'm not even asking for 100% efficiency. I think we're at
You
0%.
say efficient, so when you say efficient, you're talking about perfect. That's
No,
what you're saying.
I didn't say are we perfect. I have energy efficient windows. They're not perfect, but they're better than windows that are not energy efficient. They save me money because they're energy efficient. There's a built-in.
I don't think that you're gonna find a perfect organization.
I'm not looking for one. I'm looking for efficiency from my government. And
Now,
that's why I don't trust my government, because they have no incentive to become more efficient, because we rationalize it away by saying it's the status quo.
I just seem to different with you on that.
I love this podcast, and I have so enjoyed our conversation with Simone Pemberton. Mr. Floyd, what are your final thoughts for our audience?
Before you go, vote early to make sure that you can vote.
Please make sure you can vote. I'm a testament that if you don't check it out, you might be screwed when you go to cast that ballot.
That is my purpose, and vote early and make sure that that purpose is a member of Amazon.
Are you excited about this upcoming election cycle?
Not really.
Me neither, Floyd.
I mean, not. I mean, because my community have always been taken for granted. I was talking with a minister the other day, and I said, "Sir, in all due respect, why do I have to advertise in your community when I know over 95% of you are going to vote D?
Right.
Why
Right.
why do I need to advertise?
Why spend my money here? My money is better spent somewhere else,
Yeah.
where I have to actually convince them to vote. Yeah.
I mean, so I'm not motivated in what I've seen, and I am a Greek. Uh, I don't recall the Greek came behind Shirley Beasley, Harley that ran for lieutenant governor. The North Carolina Black Pack. I never, they don't come up, but all of a sudden, when it's someone else, they come out of the cloud. I
Yeah.
mean, so I'm not, am I going to vote? Yes, but I'm not enthused about the process.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess my final thoughts would be, in all thy getting, get an understanding. That's one of those classic quotes that we always hear that we don't, I don't think we give enough weight to. That's what I'm trying to do right now, Ms. Floyd. And all my getting, I am trying to get an understanding, because that's what we exist for. So before we can help anybody else understand, we must first. I really appreciate our guest, Simone Pemberton, for coming on. Thank you for helping to make sure that we always coordinate the best information for our listeners, our viewers. And I just want everybody to continue to like, share, subscribe, and follow, to tell a friend, to tell a friend, to tell a friend, to tell another friend. And we will continue to be here on Thursdays as long as the Lord says the same. And that, I think, about sums up what we got going on today. You got anything else before I hit this outro?
No.
Then we'll catch you on the next. You too, sir. We'll catch you on the next episode.